the first keynote speech by Samantha Connelly. So, I would like to say something about Samantha. Sam is also known as Bug Hunter Sam online. You must have all heard about it. Sam is an esteemed tester from Sydney, Australia. She conducts frequent pair testing exercises on YouTube with testers from around the world. Community and continuous learning are the core values for her. Sam specializes in mobile apps and the finance sector, often consulting in this space under her own company. And her topic is tales of fail. We all know that we are all scared of failures, right? So, as testers, we often have to deal with failures, whether it's a devastating bug report or feeling like we haven't done enough testing. We are surrounded by this sense of failure a lot. Your stories of how to lead in the industry has failed throughout their career, from redundancies to firings and everything in between. So, it's a talk on how we can build resilience as testers with a bit of mental health focus. Over to you, Samantha.
Cool. I am going to be participating under two profiles on this. So if the technology doesn't work at all, so I'm using a microphone through a computer, but I'm using a mobile app for the film. For some reason, my camera is not working on the desktop, so you get to see me twice.
No issue. We love to.
Cool. But I assume technology wise it is otherwise working. The next test then is to share my screen. I think I will just share the whole screen so you probably get a bit of duplication. And if I start the slideshow, there we go. That looks like it's up and running. I do have a QR code to access the slides and the accompanying blog post for this talk, and also a link as well. So to start off the premise, I feel like a failure. Nearly every single day I wake up and I feel like a failure. I know this is not true, but it is something that has been conditioned into my mind. It is unfortunate that I feel like a failure, but I hope that I am not the only person here in this room that sometimes feels like a failure. And the focus of this talk is to go through how I've perceived failure in my career and how I've gone about trying to build resilience and grow my career as a tester. So first of all, to start off with the failures, I failed school. I started uni, as an 18, 19-year-old. I enrolled in mechatronics engineering, computer science, overloaded with a diploma of Japanese. I passed high school in the top 3% of my state. I was told I was a smart cookie and I could do whatever I want. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in school, and I thought robotics in Japan sounded interesting, so why not? Then I developed chronic depression going through school. I started failing my engineering subjects. I was 3/4 of the way through a computer science degree, so I ended up dropping the engineering because I had been working from the age of 14 as well as studying full time this whole period, and my brain just went, you know what? I've had enough. You're doing too much. I can't cope. We're dropping out of school. So that was my first failure. But that led to me getting a career in testing because as I was failing some of these subjects in school, I was looking at starting my tech career. I'd worked in supermarkets for 7 years, part-time, all through high school, and I was just looking for a job that was a little bit more related to my studies compared to working in a supermarket. And so I was actually originally looking for a graduate developer role, but managed to, I didn't have enough experience. They said we want someone with a bit more know-how, and they said keep an eye out on our testing roles instead. So I started applying for part-time testing roles while I was going through uni. My first job. Out of this failure in school, I ended up getting a part-time job testing a point of sale software, which is the software they use in supermarkets. So my supermarket experience helped me land a job kind of more than my degree or my failed attempt at studies. As I was going through my career, about 4 years into moving to Sydney, I'm originally from Tasmania, so I moved about 8 years ago. So about 4 years into this journey, I broke my ankle. And that had a huge impact on my mental well-being as well. So that I guess that's a physical failure, but it also impacted me mentally. At the time, my career was, I thought, I had gotten the optimum job in tech. I was working for one of those big giant tech companies, working on a mobile app that's used for mapping and navigation. It is installed by default on the Android operating system. I can't officially say the name of the client because this talk is recorded, but wink wink, hopefully you know the company. So I thought this was meant to be the ultimate, tech place to work. In my mind, that's what it was. But before I broke my ankle, I was really struggling to figure out my space in this. I was a contractor on this project, and I felt really isolated. And after 9 months of doing this bug triaging for this big giant app, it gets a bit boring, a bit repetitive. And because I wasn't able to get satisfaction from my role in this big giant tech company, I couldn't ask for support on the client side because that was against the rules of the contract. I couldn't talk about anything performance or work related with the colleagues that I was working with. And on the contracting side, I was the only person in my company assigned to this client's project. And so I couldn't really seek any support or help from my contracting company either. And so it just made me feel like a failure, like I couldn't get into a solid testing career because I'm working at this company which is meant to be one of the best tech companies to work for, and I just wasn't getting any satisfaction with my career. The next role I tried was a quality coach role with a smaller company here in Sydney. And on paper, it seemed like the best company for what I was trying to achieve at my career at the time. It was about coaching and mentoring developers, trying to uplift quality. It's that trying to encourage that quality as a team responsibility. I did not pass probation in this role. I was performance reviewed out, and part of it, I think, was because I was recovering from this broken ankle. I didn't actually start this role on the correct foot. There's a pun in there. But because I wasn't able to focus all of my mental energy on starting this new role and trying to build up a reputation with the engineering team, I lost this reputation and I wasn't able to rebuild it. And so I was performance managed out and I didn't pass probation. I'd say this was kind of related to struggling with mental health at the time. I was just unable to fulfill that role. And it came back to that just kind of feeling like a failure, not being able to get what I want out of my career. At this time as well, in my 20s, I was struggling with a huge amount of credit card debt. I think it was, it was 35k AUD by the end of my 20s, and I think that's 18 lux. So it's a shit ton of money. So I struggled with credit card debt in my 20s, and this was something that made me feel like a huge failure. I knew I was a smart person. Why was I being so stupid with my own money? I've managed to get out of that debt now. And by going through this process, I've learned that keeping a good emergency fund is essential for your own mental well-being and stability through a career. It's like if you can't work or if you find yourself being made redundant or there are any other things that come up, having that 3-month emergency fund is a great way to ensure against some of these issues that can come up in your career. But yes, another failure to add to the list of failures. There was a redundancy after that. So after I'm struggling with all of this debt, trying to figure out what to do with my career, I joined a startup. It was a meditation app. I never thought in all of my career I'd be a software tester for a meditation app because if there's bugs in production, people can still meditate. I was really surprised that the CTO convinced the team that they needed a lead automation engineer. And this was a tiny engineering team of like 12 people. Everyone was technically a lead. And so they were just inflated titles. But about 6 months into that role, I was made redundant because some of the funding that was behind the company, they were maybe 2 to 3 months behind actually getting a self-sufficient business. And the investors had withdrawn some of their backing, and it was really just a bad circumstance working through that. Just keeping an eye on time. Cool. Yeah, and so working through a redundancy wasn't necessarily I didn't feel like a failure personally, but it is another one of those things that can come up during your career and just make you question whatever you're doing with stuff. Then after that startup, I thought I was going to join another startup as a potential head of engineering up in Newcastle, which is about a 2 to 3 hour drive north of Sydney. It's the next second biggest city in Australia. No, after Melbourne. It's the next biggest city in New South Wales, which is my state. Yeah, so a lot of people, it's about 2 hour drive away. So I had inspected rentals, I'd put down a deposit on a place, and then a week before I was meant to start this role, they actually turned around and said, oh, actually, we don't actually want you here. And the story I was told was someone talked to someone else, because the tech industry is quite small. Someone knew someone from the company where I had that quality coach role, the one that I didn't pass probation. And so someone talked to someone, and from their point of view, it looked like I didn't perform in the quality coach role. So whoever they talked to didn't have the right context of the situation of why I was let go from that quality coach role. They didn't quite have the full picture. But people like to gossip in technology, and so someone on this board of this new startup in Newcastle reached out to someone who used to work in that company where I was a quality coach, and basically said something that indicated about my struggles with mental health. So I would say it was actually a bullet dodged, but it was very annoying because I'd already told my housemate I was going to move out. They'd already found a new housemate. I'd put down a deposit on a new place, and I'd already mentally prepared myself to move to another city, but it wasn't to happen. And I remained in Sydney, which I think overall has turned out for the better. But another list of failures to add to the CV of failures. And then I joined a big bank here in Australia, and that was going relatively well, but I had a series of poor performance reviews. I think partly it was my manager didn't know what was going on with the mobile team. I was on a mobile team, and we got to release an app from internal beta release to external release and watch that whole process. So it was a really greenfield project. And so even though this was working in big giant bank, it felt like a small startup team, because there was one Android developer, one iOS developer, 2 backend engineers, 2 testers, and a few other people that were involved with this team building this from the ground up. And it was a really insightful project to work on. I'm still really proud of that project. But in the backlog of releasing a successful app and getting customer engagement, I just had a slew of poor performance reviews, which is like really disheartening from a like if you're trying to build a successful career and you've got someone on this side who's basically saying, look, I don't think you're doing good enough in this job. I expected different things. And one of the poor performance reviews was related to not doing back-end test automation. I'm like, yeah, that is valid. I am not doing that. But it's because I'm on the mobile team in this big giant bank architecture. They won't issue you 2 different machines to work from home with. And because I was on the app team, I needed a Mac to be able to do all of the app code stuff, because, you know, Apple's a bit like that with their mobile app development. And the back end was written in C#. So I needed a Microsoft machine because we couldn't port that code over to the Mac system. And I could only use one machine working from home for some weird reason. And so when my boss said, look, you're not doing a lot of back-end automation, I'm like, yeah, the technology doesn't support it. It is quite a struggle. If I want to do more back-end automation, I actually have to come into the office and use the other machine I'm not using day to day, and go through that process. And which, like, I was going into the office slightly more, and that was during the peak of the pandemic, but it was also because some of the mobile testing required you to be on the corporate Wi-Fi, which again is kind of frustrating, but it did mean I was in the office slightly more during the pandemic because of stuff like that. We had a side note, we had an on-premise device cloud that we had a team in India using for testing purposes, and oh my god, the lag that they had. I don't know how they got anything done. It would have been really frustrating to work with, but that's a side note. I can sympathize with working from another country and having to deal with international lag in a corporate network. Oh, and recently I did pass probation for a test lead role. And this was with a smaller company, an engineering team of 14 people, large, and the total company was 40 people. This was the first tester that they hired, and it was really trying to uplift the quality is a team responsibility. I was told I didn't quite have the skills, and I was quite disappointed about receiving this. So when I previously didn't pass probation with the quality coach role, at least I was coached and mentored and I was given an opportunity to improve and see if it was really not the right fit. So I could actually see that I wasn't going to pass probation, and so I could prepare myself a bit more. Whereas this most recent batch of not passing probation, it was just one day, my boss pulled me into the office and said, hey, it's not working. We actually wanted someone to drive a quality plan a bit faster than already had an idea of what metrics to measure to help drive quality and help make the engineers more responsible. And it's like, okay. But it was just pulled in one day and, sorry, you haven't passed probation. So it was a little frustrating to deal with. I've now just this week started a new contract role with another mobile app team, and I think overall it has turned out for the better. And I have ended up in a better position, but I'm still frustrated, a bit salty, a bit annoyed about that situation. So where does this sense of failure come from? Where I grew up, my dad wasn't necessarily the smartest person. If you know anything about Australia and the stereotypes, I would say my dad is a stereotypical bogan. He didn't pass high school. He dropped out of school when he was 14. He's got tattoos. He's a tradie. He's a builder. He builds kitchens and bathrooms. So he's very good with his hands. Runs his own business doing garden and home maintenance. Has like 5 teeth on the top row. So he's a character. And he like tattoos and stuff like that. But growing up with that type of person who didn't quite have the best emotional intelligence, I internalized a lot of how he spoke to me. So my sense of failure is actually my dad's voice internalized telling me I can't do anything right. And I've worked through schema therapy with a therapist recently to overcome that voice, to make that voice not so loud, not so present, not so front and center on a day-to-day basis. But sometimes the way we talk to ourselves internally can come from like a really bad experience. Either it's like the way we grew up, or we went through something traumatic in high school, or for some reason our brain has developed this coping mechanism. And it helped us survive that moment as a young person, but it's not all that healthy to have that response in your brain as an adult. So other sources of failures that I imagine have come up in most careers, dealing with the interview, can really feel like you're being put on the spot, you're being told you're not good enough or anything like that. And really the only way to get over that sense of failure is through practice. It's approaching interviews as if you are performing, so the sense of failure can come from interviews. I'm going to completely butcher this phrase, but I was told it was pronounced Lokia Kahenge. What will people say? And that can trigger a sense of failure as well. If you are concerned with what people will say or what people will think of you, you are going to also generate this sense of failure internally, because people are always going to criticize you for not doing enough. They're always going to say things. So why care about what they're going to say? So in terms of building resilience, whenever you try something new, whether it's your career or you're trying to cook something new or anything, it does come with risk. That's part of the learning process. It's okay to fail when you are trying new things, and try not to get caught up on that. Maybe just acknowledge it, and maybe not try to take it as personally as I do with my poor mental health. Acknowledge nothing goes to plan. Things that have helped me overcome my sense of failure have been going through therapy or counseling or just talking to other people about some of the struggles I have mentally, but also doing a bit of self-reflection. Reflecting on what you want out of your career, your relationships, your family, or anything like that can help you consolidate what you're trying to get out of it, and that can help you deal with the sense of failure a bit more too. Now, I will give you a couple of tools that you can use to talk about mental health. Spoon theory is a disability metaphor, but it's to do with limited capacity. Say, most people have a certain amount of spoons per day, and doing things consumes spoons. Taking a shower might consume a spoon. Most people have an almost infinite amount of spoons, but if you're struggling with mental health or recovering from some other chronic condition, your spoons are greatly reduced, or things can cost more spoons. So if you're feeling low on energy, I often with my partner use this metaphor to say, look, I'm just out of spoons. I don't have the capacity to deal with, maybe going out and talking to people, or I'm going to have a bath and I'm going to recharge my spoons. Or so we use this metaphor, just talk about capacity and energy. Another tool that I've developed through therapy is externalizing that voice. So instead of it being part of you, being an essential part of you, you abstract it out. You externalize it. So through therapy, my therapist got me to imagine that this critic that was always telling me that I was a failure is like a Muppet. It's always coming up and interrupting. And so if I notice this Muppet whispering in my ear, you're such a failure, why did you get up today? I can say, look, Muppet, it's nice to see you here, but do you mind taking a step back? Maybe tell it you're not driving this bus anymore, go to the back of the bus, or whatever analogy you want to use. If you try to catch that voice when it's trying to flare up, when it's trying to cause you anxiety or stress, and you go, look, that is not helpful right now, please step aside unless you're going to add anything useful, can also be a way to help get that voice inside of your head just a little bit further out, so you're not getting caught up in the stress and anxiety of it on a day-to-day basis. My final sentiment is that hopefully you can feel more comfortable about talking about your failings. It will help you and your community. I've learnt that talking about failings and mental health can be a bit of taboo in some cultures. So hopefully this helps uplift that taboo a little bit. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take questions, and you can access all of the information for this presentation. And I would like to restart the YouTube pair testing. I've taken a bit of a break from that because I've been studying a little bit over the last year or two, but I would love to restart the pair testing on YouTube. So if you would love to participate, feel free to reach out to me or nominate a colleague that you would like to see me pair test with. And I'll pull up the chat and answer any questions.
Folks, feel free to add your question in the Q&A or chats wherever, and Sam will be really happy to answer those questions.
Hey, I think I saw one raised hand. Not sure. I just don't remember the name. But folks,
Yeah,
feel free to drop in your question if you have any.
yeah, that was Savita. So in case if you have any queries, please feel free to post the queries.
Okay, let's wait for a few seconds. Okay, I think we are good. So, thank you very much, Sam. Your story is really, really inspiring. Clearly, failure is an inescapable part of life and a critically important part of any successful life, I would say. Thank you for giving us your valuable time. And folks, we would like to have your feedback if you have any for Sam. We'll launch a poll and please provide your inputs. Krish, can you launch the poll?
Folks, I think you were able to see the poll.